Well, some people say that four-door hardtops have too many doors, but I think this car proves that very, very wrong. This is a 1968 Oldsmobile 88 four-door hardtop finished in willow gold iridescent, and it's just an all-around gorgeous car. Oldsmobile during these years really had something special going, even if the cars weren't overly great sellers. So between the custom, which this car is, hardtop sedan, and the holiday hardtop sedan in 1968, Oldsmobile sold about 40,000 units, which really isn't all that great. For comparison, Pontiac sold about 60,000 1968 Bonnevilles. But nonetheless, this Olds really is a stunner, particularly in this color. Now, similar to other years, this 1968 Oldsmobile featured one-year-only styling. The front, the rear, and even the interior trim details and seat stitch patterns were only available in 1968. So very unique. And 1968 was also Oldsmobile's first year of their 455, which they basically took the 425 cubic inch V8 from 1967 and increased the stroke from a little less than 4 inches to 4.25 inches, both motors having a 4.13 inch bore. And this car came standard with a 455 engine with a 2-barrel carburetor, if you can believe that, making 320 horsepower in the automatic form. And there were optional 455s, like with a 4-barrel carburetor that had 365 horsepower. The top 455s in horsepower were reserved for the Tornados, which had a standard 375 horsepower 455 and optional 400 horsepower 455 in this year. Take a look at the interior in this super unique seat stitching pattern here on the custom trim, which this car is in beautiful condition. Even has air conditioning. You can see the center outlet vent and the 8-track tape player that says Oldsmobile below the dash. The steering wheel is quite similar to 1967, although interestingly the gear shift is different, and the steering wheel no longer has the red center. But that seat stitch pattern is just awesome looking, I think, in this car, and the black gives it that particularly formal look. I mentioned in previous videos that many Oldsmobile interiors of this era were done by a gentleman named Blaine Jenkins, who did the 72 98 Regency interior. He did the updated 67 Tornado interior from the 66, and likely did this interior as well. And the reason I say that is because of the distinct number of buttons on the interior, which was one of his trademarks. Now, as we back away from the car, you can see this really gorgeous profile that the four-door hardtop has. And even the first year of the side marker light, they've done a great job integrating it with the Oldsmobile Rocket logo there on the rear quarter panel. I also love the detailing and the tail lights that are inset in the bumper with the crosshatch pattern that Olds used on a number of years back to the mid-60s. And that script mid-century modern Oldsmobile spelled out in the middle there, I think, is just really cool. These Oldsmobiles were engineered under the watch of a gentleman by the name of John Belts, who became Oldsmobile's chief engineer in 1964 and was responsible for the Tornado project and was later promoted to general manager in 1969. Now, sadly, John succumbed to cancer at a relatively young age in 1972. He was in his early to mid-40s and passed on, but left a great legacy at Oldsmobile of engineering cars that not only look great, but were great drivers. Pontiac during this period was really pushing performance, but to be honest, it was the Oldsmobiles that handled much better than Pontiacs. Pontiacs really had a boulevard-style ride, and they sold on performance. But everything about the suspension on this Oldsmobile is more sporty than a Pontiac of the same era. Everything from the stabilizer bar being almost a quarter-inch thicker to the spring rates being 15% stiffer in the front. So these cars handled better, cornered better than Pontiacs, although they had a more conservative image. And Olds really, I guess you could say, used that to their advantage. They never touted performance, but the cars always performed well and generally satisfied customers. So if you wanted a car that handled well, you bought the Oldsmobile. If you wanted a car that sold that it handled well and performed, you bought the Pontiac. And during this period, Olds was doing some really radical things in the powertrain department. They never made it to production, but they did have overhead cam 8-cylinder engines that a number of magazines featured and tested. And obviously they did bring the Tornado to market with the front-wheel drive technology. It's a longitudinally mounted engine, meaning that the cylinder banks are parallel to the sides of the car, not perpendicular to it like a transversely mounted engine. And I did mention in the powertrain department that Oldsmobile had an optional 400 horsepower. That's gross horsepower, not net horsepower, admittedly, but 400 gross horsepower, 455 cubic inch V8 that was available in the 1968 Tornado, which at the time was General Motors' highest rated V8 until the 1970 Cadillac 500 cubic inch motor came along and tied it at 400 gross horsepower. So Olds was doing some really neat things and just building cars that were, well, a bit conservative in the styling department. On the interior and the exterior were great drivers. Here you can see one more up-close look of the interior. The steering wheel center is no longer red as it was in the 67, but very similar steering wheel. And this has a interestingly curved gear shift, which the 67 does not. But otherwise quite similar on the inside of the instrument panel. The seat stitching pattern, the door panels are all different. Incidentally, Olds during this period often had performance packages with a W prefix, and the W came about. Oldsmobile in the 50s was using the J prefix, but they found that the J followed by a number of the numbers were used up, and they switched to W, in part maybe because of Doc Watson, the racer, was a good friend of John Belt's, the chief engineer and later general manager. So I think John Belt's was quoted one time as when he was asked about that, as saying that whenever somebody referred to the W, he always could remember that Doc Watson helped bust his budget. I'm sure the finance guys and the bean counters didn't like these W package items. But in any event, the 68 Oldsmobile, again, one last look here at the side profile, the gorgeous willow gold iridescent paint, just glimmering in the morning sun here, back from brighter days in July. And you can see my 68 Park Lane Brougham in the background, which would have been a competitor car, really, that would have gone up against the Olds 98, but you got a standard 455 in the Olds, and you only got a standard 390 in the Park Lane. Oh well, hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching this video of another unique and rare classic car. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. You can subscribe by clicking the circular icon with the 67 Riviera at the left of the screen. Check out one of my other videos and browse around my channel. Thanks again for watching. Happy holidays to everyone.